G'day internet, welcome to another episode of Morgan Makes. My name's Morgan and I hope you're having an absolutely fantastic day, because I know I am. I apologize for the little bit of lack of content this month. I've been particularly busy. I was a bit sick earlier in the month and then I got a new job. But we'll get more into that at the end of the video. Today, we are making a cougar skull, a bronzed cougar skull. I saw a picture on Reddit a couple of weeks ago. And yeah, a dude had done a similar project, but yeah, he used actual bronze. He did it like a bronze cold cast. I didn't have the money for that at the time, so hence the new job. Let's, have a crack at doing an El Cheapo version, and that's how it came out. I think it looks pretty good. Let's see how we did it.
Okay, so here we start with the raw 3D printed file. Despite some imperfections, I'm actually really happy with how this came out first time. And if you would like to follow along at home, the link for the STL is in the description. Go to Thingiverse and download it. I printed this in Space Grey PLA from Overture at a 0.06mm layer height with an infill of 10%. I used true supports to help hold everything in place, but we still lost some teeth. My man needs to lay off the sugar. There's also some pretty bad stringing on the underside of the jaw, on the maxilla and palatine bones. I'll need to sand this back as best as I can and fill in the remaining gaps in the layer lines with some filler. But first I'm going to remove as much of the excess stringing as I can with the knife. After I deal with all the little loose bumps and strings, I use an old sanding block I found in the shed to try and smooth some of it out. It did work, but I think due to the age of the block, it made a terrible mess. It left a bunch of this black sand and dead foam everywhere in addition to the removed plastic. That's another lesson in not cheaping out on the sandpaper, but I was under weird budget constraints for this one, so I had to make do with what I got. My mum gave me this block of wood she found at the upcycling shop that she works at. It's the perfect size and shape for a mount. Cheers, Mum. But before we get to that, we need to replace some of the teeth. In Blender, I just crop off some of the teeth that I need and reprinted them. Trimming back the broken layers on the skull, it was a fairly simple process of gluing the new teeth on and letting them cure. And once that glue was dried, it was time to do some filling. I immediately ran into a problem when the first can of filler I opened was already rock hard. Good thing I have spares handy. I may have mixed the catalyst a little bit too strongly, but that works to my advantage here. The putty has a very plasticine-like consistency, which makes it easy to get the result that I wanted. I didn't need it to look perfect. I'm not even sure what perfect looks like with something like this. So I'm just using my best judgment to make it look good. After the filler putty is fully cured, I sand back again to leave it relatively smooth. I found my last decent sheet of 400 grit wet dry sandpaper, which was lucky. The finish that it gave was more than passable. Now, you may be wondering why I picked this particular skull to try this out on. Honestly, it was the first one in the search results that looked cool. We don't have any big cats natively here in Australia, although there is a long-standing local myth as to such a creature. It's one of our very own local cryptids, the Penrith Panther, the Blue Mountains cat. There have been many sightings of it over the years, and not just sightings by the bush hermits either. The local cops have seen it, the local fireys have seen it, the park rangers have seen it, and a bunch of reported sightings from pilots, both in the RFS and the RAAF. And in 2002, Kenthurst teenager Luke Walker was allegedly attacked by the creature. So much evidence exists that the New South Wales Department of Primary Industries has commissioned 4 separate reports on the phenomenon over the course of 15 years or so, from 1999 to late 2013, and it still maintains an active file on sightings. Reports as to its origin vary, from a group of circus animals that escaped captivity in the early 20th century, to intentionally released mascots of US soldiers stationed here in World War II. But whichever way you slice it, it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility that such a creature is actually out there. Some of the places in the local Blue Mountains part of the Great Dividing Range, just west of Sydney, where the majority of these sightings have taken place, are only accessible by helicopter or 5-day hike and abseil. Sounds like big cat paradise to me. Some of these places are so remote that we're not really sure what's in them. Famously, the Wallamai pine was discovered in the early 90s in a remote valley after it was thought extinct for over 100,000 years. Its location is a protected secret. Like the Isla de Muerta from the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise, we'll massacre that name, you can't find it unless you already know where it is. I mean, even house cats are really good at hiding when they don't want to be found.
Anyway, what was I doing? Oh yeah, the skull. Now that it's all fairly well sanded, there's still a little bit of rough stuff that I'm hoping the resin covers up. The resin I'm using for this will be Protype fiberglass resin.
Normally you would add fiberglass matting to make a boat or something, but today I just want the goo. Wearing gloves and a mask because you don't want to breathe this stuff, I use an old paintbrush to spread a very thin layer over everything, and trying really hard to avoid any drips in places where it might be pooling. I will have to do the underside later after this first round is cured. Looking at the cured model, I'm quite impressed with how it turned out. Some of the drips did form at the very bottom, but I can cut them off with some scissors, and I sanded down the little rough spots that remain. The power sander may short work at the fiberglass, so be careful if you're trying this yourself. Wear a mask because it's far worse as a dust than as a vapor. And after it was sanded, it was time to put the resin on the underside. It was a fairly straightforward process. I'm not exactly sure why I decided to do this in two parts, one after the other instead of at the same time. I'm sure I've had my reasons. Hey, I smoked a lot of pot in my 20s, so my short-term memory is not the best. Either way, I decided to change things up a bit with the jaw, and I spray painted it silver chrome first with a can of Fiddly Bits aluminium gloss, just to see what it would do. And the answer is that it turned the fiberglass resin grey, so not much. Yeah, it kind of adds a little something. I'm not sure you can see it on camera, but there are these little flecks of silver that are suspended in the murky grey resin. I'm probably going to paint over it anyway. And once that resin had cured, it got a similar sanding treatment to the rest of the skull. In the daylight, it looks almost the same. A final pass with the sander on both parts to make sure I got everything, a quick dust and clean, and I think we're ready to paint. And starting off the painting with a quick blast of Dulux Duramax Clear Coat to seal the fiberglass resin and give the paint some more foot to bond to. After half an hour or so, that's fully cured and we can move on to the matte black undercoat. I told you I'd paint it. Anyway, after an hour or so, I flipped the parts over and painted the underside black too. You don't want to go too hard on any of the paints here. Drips suck and they're hard to fix. And we don't want drips because the next colour is the metal tone. My trusty can of Dulux Duramax Metal Finish Copper gives me an interesting look. It's not quite the bronze I set out to achieve, but I'll settle for it. I already had the paint on hand, so it makes it really easy to budget in. But now I need something to mount it up on to elevate it off the wooden block that I've got. I initially wanted some kind of Perspex tube to hold it up, but they are very hard to find out here in my part of Western Sydney. So out comes the transparent filament again to try and make some. I could have spent a bit more time getting the settings right, but I didn't. Instead, I did a vase mode print and tried to fill it with casting resin. And I had that left over from my experiments from a few months ago. I don't know what I was hoping to achieve here, but all I managed to accomplish was making a mess. But while I was waiting for that to set and then coming up with a better idea, I decided I was going to paint the whole skull with a fairly thick layer of nuln oil to tone down the copper and give it a much darker finish. The resin in the tube secured, but it was largely unusable, so I ended up using some 8mm dowel rods cut roughly in length. I'm measuring and marking where the hole should go on this one so it won't look completely half-assed. Using an 8.5mm drill bit, I carefully drill down about 20mm into the block of timber. Some wood glue seats them in place, and I just need to make sure that they dry, standing straight up. I 3D printed these little caps to support the skull better on the posts. Yeah, it sits there kind of nicely, it's looking good. A little bit of a touch up with the nuln oil, and we also paint the underside of the skull with it too. Once it's dried, it's time for the final mounting. You could add a clear coat sealer at this stage, but I didn't bother. Not half bad if I do so myself. So, I present to you, ladies and gentlemen, the skull of the Penrith Panther.
To be or not to be? That is the question. So yeah, I'm absolutely stoked with how it turned out. I mean, it's not exactly museum quality, but it's good enough for my shelf. Very, very happy with that. Anyway, like I said, I got a new job. I'm working under the Sydney Opera House in a whole series of caves and tunnels that they have down there. Got to bring all that lighting up to code. It's actually really cool. Also get to work on the Southern Hemisphere's longest travelator. Also very interesting. I might make a video about either one of them at some point in the future, little mini documentary or something. It's pretty cool. I get to see some things that not a lot of people have. And speaking of not a lot of people, I actually have a fair few people now subscribe to me. It's absolutely fantastic. We recently breached 120 subscribers. I have basically doubled the amount of subscribers that I had in the last month or so, and I really apologize for not having any content. Like I said, I've been kind of busy, but you know, hopefully we can get this gravy train rolling, and we'll be pumping out the content a little bit more frequently. So here's hoping. I got some other projects in the works at the moment, but we'll get to them in due time. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Tell your friends about me. Leave a comment. I'd love to interact with my audience a little bit more. I'm going to get around to, basically replying to everyone at some stage. So yeah, the 120 people who subscribe to me, drop a comment, leave suggestions. I'm open to ideas at this stage. I've got a couple of projects on the table, but, I hope to make a long career out of this, so everything's bound to come around eventually. Anyway, my name has been Morgan. This has been Morgan Makes. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll see you all next time. Cheers, guys.